Not the video I was planning on doing, but because I'm British and I like to complain, obviously, that is in my nature, and I've bought it, I'm going to do a mini review and my thoughts on the new Sengoku BASARA game. Because I'm British and complaining is in my nature and I've bought it and had to play it, here's a remake of my first review of Sengoku BASARA Yukimura-Den, and let me say what an absolute disappointment this game is. Well, the game is fun, they have taken too much of the core series away from it. The main one being the humour, which was one of the standout features, like the games knew they were stupid, and a prime example being the roulette feature from Sengoku BASARA 4, which you could be transformed into a multitude of things like Motochika's ship, the bomb soldier, or Kanetsugu the Invincible, and having the ability to defeat and be defeated in one strike. It was pretty funny, you know, hacking and slashing, one-hit KOing people, but whatever. Makes you wonder where the game went wrong. For a start, this game really lacks content, much like the original release of No Man's Sky and the plethora of games that have released with less than nothing to do in them, particularly endgame or side modes. Like in this game only has 10 stages in the story mode, one of which is a one-on-one fight, followed by another one-on-one fight. It gets you to fight a single person about 3 or 4 times in a row, which is incredibly boring for a story mode game. And 2 of the stages are the exact same, with the latter version having a bit extra added onto it. Obviously that stage of being the Siege of Ueda Castle, you know, the first and second invasions. What is funnier is about the story is that it's basically non-existent. Like, this wall of text is the whole context and the backstory for what's going on. There's virtually no character development either. No one really has any reasons for fighting or fighting against one another. Like, the first stage is you play as Child Yukimura and you meet Child Masamune, you know, Ben Maru and Bonten Maru. The next stage is literally where Katsuyori dies. For example, in Samurai Warriors Spirit of Sanada, the Fall of the Takeda is like the 15th stage in, which is pretty friggin' wild. For the most part, like previous Sengoku BASARA games, the stages aren't that long and for the most part don't drag on, with the exception of boss fights. Some of them go on and on. They give bosses 2 to 4 health bars for some reason. They artificially extend the stages in that way. And to be fair, some of the characters you fight do actually have different fighting styles. So for example, defeating Nobunaga the first time will change his moves into that demon form or whatever you call it. The same with Kojiro Katakura, he'll change into that frenzy mode where he goes absolutely ape. So that is, you know, one slightly good thing, but having to defeat the same character over and over, it gets a bit annoying. You can, however, basically juggle the enemies to death, so it's just a drag after the first time you defeat them. It's almost like they knew the game had nothing, so let's add to the nothing with boring ass boss fights. In addition to the 10 story mode stages, which retell Yukimura's life as a cheap cash-in before the Japanese TV drama of his life came out to celebrate, you know, 400 years since the Siege of Osaka, there are actually 13 side stories, the majority of which are again one-on-one fights. And yes, they have the defeat the annoying clown 3 to 4 times in a row feature. Also, the difficulty is fixed in these fights, so you do actually need to power up the character's styles, which we'll get on to in a minute, to be able to deal decent damage to them and not be absolutely wiped to the floor with. For comparison, the original BASARA 4 will include the one-on-one boss fights for this example, has 66 stages, 39 actual stages, and 42 if you count the Matabe intrusion versions, which have an extra boss fight at the end for a 3-way, you know, fight. Not in a sexual way. There is one mode outside of the story and side modes, which you have to complete the story mode to do, which I would be surprised if anybody actually unlocked it, because the game is friggin' boring. And that is the Sanada Trials mode, which you fight mobs of enemies and bosses over 60 rounds with varying objectives each round. You fail if you die or run out of time, which starts at 10 minutes. Completing the objectives increases the timer. Oh, and did I mention it uses the same map for all of it, an octagonal arena in the sky. Even the Takeda Dojo in 4 had better scenery, like the crowd cheering and all that. Here it's just lazy as hell, and it's no way near as good as the aforementioned Takeda Dojo, which has a variation where you have to defeat every single playable character, bombs drop from the sky, poison gas drains your life, etc, etc. Speaking of things that aren't as good as the previous game, which, let's face it, is basically everything, character relationships are mostly reset, so there's no massive rivalries between characters like Masamune and Mitsunari, for example, and Satsuki basically has nothing to do with Yukimura. He first appears at the second Ueda battle, with no interaction with anyone else, and then he dies 2 stages later. So this is the second Ueda battle, then there's like the imprisonment at Mount Hydra, whatever it's called. That's the one-on-one stage, and then it's the winter siege of Osaka, and he dies in that one. He's not in the one-on-one fight, by the way. He never appears there. So he's just kind of there, and he doesn't actually interact the first time he appears in the story as well. Yeah, he appears at the winter siege of Osaka. That's the only time he interacts with Yukimura, and then he's dead. And Yukimura's like, "No, you died!" It makes no sense. Like, the characters have no development. It's kind of dumb. There is one exception to character relationships. Yukimura and Masamune still are rivals because it's a staple of the series, and it's kind of awkward as Masamune is really shoehorned in. There's a stage where you play as child Yukimura and Masamune, the first stage in the game. You know, Masamune's just there for some reason, although this game is meant to tie in with the drama and meant to be a bit more serious. Historically, those two probably actually never met. This game would have been a lot better if they went all out on historical or like full Basara lore. Like, the previous games are all technically sequels in the grand scheme of things, but another thing is there is virtually no character progression. For example, Nobuyuki joins Ieyasu after meeting him once, and the final stage sets you up against him like the big bad finally appears, but it all falls flat because neither actually has a good reason to be fighting for each other. And I don't actually think it's ever specified that Yukimura is fighting for the Toyotomi forces. Like, Samurai Warrior Spirit Sanada, he does actually have like a good reason, and he does carry on his like father's legacy with like all the strategies and that. And here it's just like, he just does it because, you know, reasons. It's like worse reasoning than the first Samurai Warriors game. It's just, I don't know, I honestly don't get what they were thinking with the writing in this. The writing's never been a strong suit, but it's always been dumb, so you sort of like forgive it, where it's here, it's just like actually non-existent.
Bruh.
So one of, if not the only saving grace of the game is that everyone from Sengoku BASARA Sumeragi is playable right off the bat. You know, the actual good game in the series. One of the best hack and slash on the thing. So they're playable right off the bat in the Sanada Trials mode, which you actually have to unlock. So I don't know why I wrote that. Ujimasa Hojo is actually in the game, interestingly, as a boss, but he is not a playable character, despite his last appearance in 3 Utage. So he does actually have a moveset, but he's just not playable. Which is kind of annoying. All characters also start with all techniques, skills, attacks, whatever you want to call them, all unlocked, which is quite nice, so there isn't actually any progression there. The only progression in terms of character movesets is in the story mode. You play as Masamune a few times, and, well, you don't actually unlock his super move for any reason. I don't know why that is, but Yukimura, when you first play as adult Yukimura, you can't use the R1 triangle skill or R1 skill in the first stage, and then you unlock that in the next one, and so on, and you eventually unlock his super move like 3 stages from the end, which is kind of dumb. One thing I would have said is I kind of would have liked a bit of progression with having the last 2 super moves unlocks to give something for people to work towards, but it's hardly the end of the world, also known as Armageddon. One thing I do actually want to mention is there's no character levels. It's all linked to this style system, which we'll get onto in a minute. So just keep that in mind. You can't level up naturally. You have to spend gold to do it. The game's economy is very heavily reliant on gold. It even changes KOs, you know, the thing that's in the bottom right-hand corner of any hack and slash. They changed that to how much gold you actually earn. It's pretty weird. In addition to the returning cast, there are 2 new characters in the forms of Masayuki and Nobuyuki Sanada, as well as 2 new variations of Masamune and Yukimura, child and adult, with new designs and totally new movesets. Masamune's adult version uses all 6 swords at one time, and he can block, dodge, and has, you know, normal attack power, so it's different from the originals. However, and this really grinds my gears, of those 6 characters, 4 of them, the adults obviously, have incomplete movesets. They all only have 1 super move, you know, that are 2 attacks, as opposed to everyone else, which has 3, which can be changed on the fly. And they also don't add the new attacks added in for Sumeragi, skill revisions I think they called them, which is the L1 square attacks. So they're actually missing 3 moves each, which is kind of dumb. Like, they didn't even... So the main characters in a game, they didn't even give as many attacks as, like, the supporting characters. It's kind of weird. Despite this, I do think the new characters are quite good. Masayuki plays as like a trickster-style character, and he even has a move to make himself invisible, and another that can suck enemies up into his hat. Nobuyuki, on the other hand, I can't say I'm a massive fan of his design with the twin tails, which should be, reserved for Hatsune Miku and Anzo Katatani from Girls and Panzer, my personal favourite character. Anyway, he fights with what looks like two vintage TV aerials strapped together, and has the same gimmick as Hideyoshi, being able to grapple enemies and use them to attack other enemies. The difference here is that they're attached to his weapon, like they're kind of just stuck there instead of actually being grappled and being held. I suppose I'll briefly mention Yukimura's moves as well. More of his attacks actually involve him flying through the air, which you've probably seen on screen. All of his techniques can actually be chained together, which is pretty cool. It does make like one-on-one fights kind of annoying. Should mention Masayuki's absolutely terrible in one-on-one fights. He moves all about the place. It's kind of annoying. So talking about the mechanics of the game, well, the changes to it, additions or removals of some of the stuff you'd come to expect after the last game being so damn good. So the tag team feature has been removed, meaning you are mostly on your own and without AI partners to follow you around all the time, like a creepy stalker. With it, they've also removed some of the combo abilities and made other characters harder to play, such as Shingen, which you could, swap out of if, charging your attacks took too long, or prevent disruption from enemy attacks as well. It allowed you to play as another character just in case you were getting bored, which this genre does suffer a lot from, let's be honest. And now on to my main gripe with this game. To me, this series has always been about choice. Every character plays vastly different from each other, like Naotora can combine any of her techniques to fit any situation, Hideyoshi can grapple enemies to use as weapons, Kasuga can trap enemies with her wires. On top of the characters in the previous game, there were inscriptions, which are like weapon attributes, which enhance the mechanics of the game, which you get a massive selection of, like being able to do elemental damage, bonus critical chance and damage, easier parries and stronger blocks, and even personal inscriptions which change some of the characters wildly, like Naotora dealing double damage to men but half damage to women. Taunting as Keiji makes enemies dance and his attacks can be comboed at any time, wacky stuff like that. The good thing was you could have up to 6 of these inscriptions at once on a weapon. Now, what they've done with this game is removed all of that and replaced them with what they call styles. Styles come in sets with 3 skills in each, so for example you get one style which will focus on attack with bonuses focusing on that, or one that will be focused on defense, ones that make you invincible for a short time after a perfect dodge, etc, etc. There's a whole translation guide on these which makes the system look really complex. It's just absolutely baffling. It's just fucking dumb. The system, that is, not the translation guide. The translation guide's really good. But going off what I said 6 years ago, picking that style gives you only those bonuses, no customization, no fixed playstyles. If you want elemental damage, you have to pick that style and give up any other bonuses. Same with personal styles. I mean, I think it's kind of dumb that if I want to be able to make enemies dance as Keiji, I can't also have elemental damage, or being able to actually deal decent damage to enemies. The worst part about this is that styles cost money to upgrade and are basically character levels, as your stats are tied to the style system. And what I don't get is you have to pay for new styles, so if you don't like it, it's just an absolute waste of money. Some of the more expensive ones are like the elemental and the personal styles. Like, why would you go through the trouble of playing this boring game to buy a style system, to go back to level 1, to then just pay money to level it up, and then you might not even like it? It's just, I don't get it. You don't like a style and want to change? Well, you're now playing from level 1 again. Words cannot describe how much I hate it. It's probably worse than that time I didn't get invited to my best friend's wedding, but my ex did as a best woman. Absolute joke, a crime worse than liking Dynasty Warriors 9. The thing is, as well, is styles are linked to the Bushin system, and in the words of the developers, the Bushin system is designed to encourage aggressive styles of play. The system works by you defeating enemies with blue health bars, and these power up your character abilities, which the style system fits into. Because the more Bushin you have, the stronger your passive abilities get with the style system. and will become unlocked. There's like 3 levels, which is all this, you know, jumble of crap above the character portrait over here. So there's 3 levels of it, which increases every time you defeat enemies with blue health bars, like we said before, or finding it in boxes or wherever. However, the Bushin gauge and abilities will decrease when you get hit. They have actually patched this since I initially played the game, so you have to take an absolute ton of damage to for it to decrease, and I don't believe it actually decreases over a certain period of time, which is, you know, it's better, but originally it was pretty counterintuitive. What I don't get is the developers' comments. It's like, let's have different types of play with the styles, you know, defensive and all that, but then everyone has to play aggressive for the Bushin system, which is where the passive abilities are linked into. Like, why is this a thing? There's defensive styles, but you can't make use of them because when you get hit, it gets weaker and weaker. Did people not actually check what they were doing when they made this game or something? And the thing is, it's not very newcomer friendly then either, is it? It's like they only want veterans playing this game, and the funny thing is, this is basically the Renbu system from Dynasty Warriors 6, which everyone hated, except you get less and less attacks depending on how much Renbu you had. But here it's, you know, passive abilities that you had to spend gold on to unlock in the fucking first place. It just makes 0 sense. I just genuinely hate this game. Anyway, that's my thoughts, re-review, if you will, on this game. Is it fun? You can have fun with it, but the fun you get is already done in a better game in the form of Sengoku BASARA Force Sumeragi, which is one of the best hack and slash games to date. This game was a disaster. They reduced the price of it within the first week it went on sale, and as a cash-in for a TV drama, you would have thought they would have waited. I mean, look at Koei's offering about the same character and another tie into that drama, you know, Samurai Warriors Spirit of Sanada, and it was an upgrade to the previous games in almost every way. This was a game so bad that it almost killed the series. They announced or leaked that there was going to be a Sengoku BASARA 5 at some time ago, and there's been another anime of it where the character's in high school or some BS. But other than that, this series is pretty much dead and buried with this. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this updated review for a game that nobody cared about the first time I talked about it. So my next review will be about games I actually enjoy, or maybe I'll finally complete that anime tier list after 200 previous attempts that I've not been happy with. But anyway, thank you very much for watching if you did, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.